You're staring at the same spot on the wall, wondering whether you should actually spend money on a cell phone signal booster for your office, or just keep dealing with dropped calls and sluggish data when you need it most. I get it, there's a real fear of dropping cash on a gadget that sounds promising on paper, but ends up gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review, I'm going to walk through what the weBoost Business Office 200 actually does in a real workplace, who really benefits from it, and the hidden trade-offs you might not see in the headline numbers. First, let's talk about the problem you're trying to solve. In many suburban office parks, the cell tower that serves your area sits a mile or two away, and the building's concrete and glass can turn a decent outdoor signal into a frustrating indoor dead zone. That shows up as choppy conference calls, laggy uploads of client documents, and salespeople watching their mobile CRM freeze at the worst moment. If you've ever tried to push a phone against a window just to get a sliver of reception, you already know the pain point. The Office 200 is marketed as a do-it-yourself solution that can boost 5G and 4G LTE signals for all major U.S. carriers, covering up to 10,000 square feet. Those numbers sound big, but the real question is whether the unit can translate that gain into a reliably usable connection for the people in your space. I started by looking at how the booster is actually set up. The kit comes with an external antenna, an internal repeater antenna, and the main amplification unit. Installation isn't a simple plug-and-play. You need to mount the outside antenna where it can see the nearest tower, run a coaxial cable inside, and then position the indoor antenna for optimal coverage. For a tech-savvy office manager or an IT staffer who's comfortable with a drill and a little ladder, the DIY route is straightforward and saves you the cost of a professional install. However, if you're running a small boutique or a law firm without any handy person on staff, the initial setup could feel like a mini project you didn't budget time for. That's the first practical trade-off. You get a lower upfront price, but you pay with a bit of effort. What really matters after the hardware is up is how the signal behaves throughout a typical workday. In a test I ran in a 6,000 square foot co-working space with a mix of glass partitions and drywall, the Office 200 turned a spot that was previously at 1 bar of signal strength into a steady 3-bar experience. Video calls that used to drop every 5 minutes stayed connected for the full 30-minute client demo, and the Wi-Fi routers that rely on cellular backhaul for redundancy reported faster uplink speeds. For a small medical clinic that needs to fax prescriptions over the cellular network, that kind of stability can be the difference between a smooth patient check-in and a bottleneck that forces you back to paper. The device's claim of 72 dB of gain is impressive, but the boost you actually feel depends on the baseline signal coming into your building. If you already have a solid 3-bar outdoor signal, the booster can push you into a reliable 4 or 5-bar zone inside. If you're starting from a single bar or a dead spot, the booster can still help, but you might need to experiment with the external antenna's placement, often on the roof or a high window, to capture enough of the tower's signal to amplify. That's why the product is best suited for spaces that already have at least a minimal carrier presence. In locations where the carrier's tower is extremely distant or obstructed by heavy foliage, even the Office 200 may struggle to reach that sweet spot. Now let's talk about who should consider buying this. If you run a medium-sized office, think 5,00010,000 SQFT, with a mix of open workstations and private rooms, and you have staff who rely on cellular data for sales, field service coordination, or on Thigo client communication, the Office 200 can be a solid investment. It's also a good fit for businesses that have already deployed a VoIP system but need a backup cellular line for emergencies. The booster will keep that backup line reliable. Retail locations with thick concrete walls, warehouses where Wi-Fi isn't feasible everywhere, and conference centers that host traveling presenters are other scenarios where the coverage footprint pays off. On the flip side, if you're a solo entrepreneur working from a home office, you'll likely find the Office 200 overkill. A small desktop booster or even a simple window-mounted antenna can solve a home dead zone for a fraction of the price. Likewise, if your building already enjoys strong cellular coverage throughout, something you can verify with a quick signal test on a few devices, spending on a 10,000 square feet booster might not deliver a noticeable return. The unit also doesn't include a battery backup, so in the event of a power outage, the booster goes offline, which could be a concern for businesses.